The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the busy streets of downtown Chicago. People hurried along the sidewalks, some clutching coffee cups, others scrolling through their phones. Among them stood Maya Johnson, a young black woman with a determined look on her face. She held up a handmade sign that read, "Justice for All," in bold black letters. Her presence wasn't loud or disruptive. She simply stood there, silently making her point. Maya had chosen to attend this, protest quietly without drawing attention to herself. As the newly appointed police chief of Chicago, she felt it was important to see how officers interacted with protesters firsthand. She wanted to understand what the public felt when they came face to face with law enforcement during tense moments like these. So, instead of wearing her uniform, she dressed casually in jeans and a simple jacket, blending in with the crowd. Across the street, Officer Ryan Carter leaned against his patrol car, watching the small group of demonstrators gather near the steps of a government building. Ryan was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with an air of authority. He had been on the force for over a decade, but his reputation wasn't exactly spotless. Many knew him as someone who didn't tolerate nonsense, especially from people he considered troublemakers. His colleagues often joked about his short temper, though none dared say it to his face. Ryan's eyes narrowed as he spotted Maya standing by herself. To him, she looked like just another protester, one more person adding fuel to the fire. He didn't recognize her without her uniform, nor did he care to ask questions. All he saw was someone blocking traffic, holding a sign that seemed to mock everything he believed in. "Move along," Ryan barked, striding toward her with purpose. His boots clicked against the pavement, announcing his approach. A few heads turned, but most ignored him, too focused on their own conversations or chants. Maya heard him coming but didn't flinch. She kept her gaze steady, her grip firm on the edges of her sign. When Ryan stopped in front of her, towering over her slight frame, she finally spoke. "I'm not doing anything wrong," she said calmly. "This is a public space." Ryan frowned, irritation bubbling beneath the surface. "You're causing a scene. Do you want people to get hurt? Move it." "I have every right to be here," Maya replied, her voice unwavering. "And I'm not leaving until I've made my point." Her confidence only fueled Ryan's anger. In his mind, she was being defiant for no good reason. He stepped closer, invading her personal space. "Last warning," he growled. "Leave now, or I'll make you leave." Maya didn't back down. She met his glare with a steady stare, refusing to let fear show on her face. Around them, the noise of the protest faded into the background. Bystanders began to notice the confrontation, pulling out their phones to record the exchange. Someone shouted, "Hey, leave her alone!" But Ryan ignored them. In that moment, something inside Ryan snapped. Whether it was frustration, prejudice, or a combination of both, he couldn't say. Without thinking, he reached out and shoved Maya backward. The force of his push sent her stumbling, her sign slipping from her hands and clattering to the ground. Before she could regain her balance, Ryan grabbed her arm roughly and yanked her forward. Then, in a shocking display of violence, he pulled back his fist and punched her squarely in the jaw. The impact knocked Maya off her feet, sending her sprawling onto the cold concrete. Pain shot through her face as she landed hard, gasping for breath. For a split second, everything went silent. Then chaos erupted. Onlookers screamed in outrage, rushing toward the scene. Phones were held high, capturing every horrifying detail. Someone shouted, "Call 911," while another yelled, "That's assault, you can't do that." Ryan froze, suddenly aware of the cameras pointed at him. Panic flickered in his eyes as he realized the magnitude of what he'd just done. Maya groaned, slowly pushing herself upright. Blood trickled from a cut on her lip, and her cheek was already starting to swell. Despite the pain, she forced herself to stand, brushing dirt off her clothes. Her sign lay broken nearby, its message torn in half. She locked eyes with Ryan, her expression unreadable. Was it shock? Anger? Or something else entirely? Before anyone could intervene further, a man in a suit pushed through the crowd. It was Lieutenant Greg Miller, one of Ryan's superiors. He'd heard the commotion from blocks away and rushed to the scene. Taking one look at Maya's battered face and Ryan's clenched fists, Greg immediately understood the gravity of the situation. "What the hell happened here?" Greg demanded, his voice sharp. Ryan opened his mouth to explain, but no words came out. Instead, he stammered, She wouldn't listen." Greg's gaze shifted to Maya, who was still standing, tall despite her injuries. Something about her demeanor caught his attention. There was a quiet strength in the way she carried herself even now. And then it hit him. This wasn't just any protester. It was Police Chief Maya Johnson. Greg's jaw dropped. "Do you know who this is?" he asked Ryan, gesturing toward Maya. Ryan blinked, confused. "Who?" "She's the new police chief," Greg said, his tone dripping with disbelief. "You just assaulted your boss." Ryan's blood ran cold. He stared at Maya, finally recognizing her. She didn't look triumphant or vengeful, just tired, exhausted even. But the weight of his actions crashed down on him all at once. He had crossed a line he could never uncross. The crowd around them buzzed with whispers. Someone muttered, "Unbelievable," while another added, "This is why we can't trust cops." Maya ignored them all. She bent down to pick up the pieces of her sign, wincing as she moved. Then, without saying another word, she walked away, leaving Ryan standing there, frozen in shame. As Maya disappeared into the distance, the reality of the situation began to sink in, not just for Ryan but for everyone who had witnessed the incident. What had started as a peaceful protest had spiraled into something far darker, exposing cracks in the system that couldn't be ignored. For Maya, it was a painful reminder of the work that still needed to be done. For Ryan, it was the beginning of a reckoning he wasn't sure he was ready to face. And so, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the city lights flickered to life, the events of that day would ripple outward, setting the stage for a story of accountability, redemption, and the fragile hope of change. The video of the incident spread like wildfire. Within hours, it was everywhere. Social media platforms, news websites, and even late-night talk shows. The clip showed Officer Ryan Carter shoving Maya Johnson to the ground and punching her before bystanders could intervene. The footage was grainy, but there was no mistaking the brutality of his actions or the shock on Maya's face as she hit the pavement. By morning, hashtags like Truck and Justice for Maya and Friedbanger Police Accountability were trending nationwide. Protesters gathered outside the Chicago Police Department headquarters, holding signs that read "No more abuse" and "Protect and serve who." The crowd chanted loudly, demanding answers and accountability. Reporters jostled for position, microphones in hand, trying to get statements from anyone willing to speak. Inside the precinct, tension hung thick in the air. Officers avoided eye contact with one another, whispering nervously about the viral video. Some defended Ryan, saying he was just doing his job, while others distanced themselves, knowing full well how bad the footage looked. Lieutenant Greg Miller called an emergency meeting to address the growing storm. "Listen up," Greg said sternly, standing at the front of the briefing room. "This isn't just about one officer anymore. This is about all of us. We're under a microscope now, and we need to handle this carefully." Ryan sat in the back corner, his head bowed. He hadn't slept the night before, haunted by images of the assault replaying in his mind. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Maya's face, the way she'd stared at him after the punch landed. He felt sick to his stomach, not just because of what he'd done, but because of who she turned out to be. After the meeting ended, Greg pulled Ryan aside. "We need to talk," he said, motioning for Ryan to follow him into his office. Once inside, Greg shut the door and turned to face him. "Do you realize the mess you've made?" Ryan nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know it was her. I swear I had no idea." Greg sighed, running a hand over his face. "That doesn't excuse what happened, Ryan. You assaulted a civilian, a woman, and not just any civilian. She's the police chief. Do you understand how serious this is?" Ryan slumped into a chair, his hands trembling. "What am I supposed to do? Turn myself in?" Greg hesitated. It might come to that. But first, we need to figure out our next steps. Internal Affairs will be investigating, and trust me, they won't go easy on you. As if on cue, there was a knock at the door. A tall man in a suit entered without waiting for an invitation. It was Agent David Cole, a representative from Internal Affairs. His expression was grim as he introduced himself and asked to speak with Ryan privately. Once Greg left the room, David took a seat across from Ryan. He placed a folder on the desk and opened it, revealing screenshots of the viral video along with witness statements. "Officer Carter," David began, his tone formal but firm, "can you explain what happened yesterday?" Ryan swallowed hard, his throat dry. I thought she was causing trouble. She wouldn't leave when I told her to, and I lost my temper." David raised an eyebrow. "Lost your temper? You punched her, officer. That's not losing your temper, that's excessive force." "I know," Ryan admitted, his voice cracking. "I messed up. I didn't mean for it to go that far." David leaned back in his chair, studying Ryan carefully. "Do you have any history of disciplinary issues?" Ryan hesitated. He knew the answer wasn't good. Over the years, he'd received several complaints about his behavior, though none had resulted in serious consequences. "A few," he muttered reluctantly. David nodded, jotting something down in his notes. "And did you recognize her at any point during the altercation?" "No," Ryan replied quickly. "Not until Lieutenant Miller told me later." David closed the folder and stood up. "All right, Officer Carter. We'll be in touch. In the meantime, consider yourself on administrative leave pending further investigation." When Ryan returned to the main area of the precinct, he found his colleagues avoiding him more than ever. Whispers followed him wherever he went, and some officers outright refused to acknowledge his presence. Even his partner, Jake, kept his distance, offering only a brief nod before heading off to patrol. News of the incident reached Maya's ears soon enough. After leaving the protest site, she had gone straight home to ice her swollen jaw and reflect on what had happened. Though physically sore, she felt a deeper ache, a mix of anger, disappointment, and sadness. As much as she wanted to dismiss the attack as an isolated incident, she knew it represented a larger issue within the department. Early the next morning, Maya arrived at the precinct dressed in her full uniform, ready to take charge. Word of her arrival spread quickly, and officers scrambled to prepare for her arrival. When she stepped out of the elevator, the entire floor fell silent. All eyes were on her, taking in the bruise on her cheek and the determined set of her jaw. Lieutenant Greg Miller approached her immediately. "Chief Johnson," he said, his tone respectful but cautious. "Are you okay?" Maya gave him a small nod. "I'm fine, Lieutenant. Thank you for asking. Let's focus on what needs to be done moving forward." Greg led her to her office, where stacks of papers and messages awaited her attention. Among them was a report detailing the preliminary findings of Internal Affairs investigation into Ryan's conduct. Maya skimmed through it, her expression unreadable. When she finished, she looked up at Greg. "What's being done about Officer Carter?" "He's on administrative leave," Greg replied. "But people are divided. Some think he deserves termination, while others believe he should get a second chance." Maya nodded thoughtfully. "Let's let the investigation run its course. In the meantime, I want to address the public directly. We can't afford to lose their trust." Later, that day, Maya held a press conference outside the precinct. Cameras flashed as she stepped up to the podium, her posture confident despite her injuries. "Good afternoon," she began, her voice steady. "I want to thank everyone who has expressed concern for my well-being. While yesterday's events were difficult, they highlight a critical issue that we must confront as a community." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Law enforcement exists to serve and protect. But when trust is broken, it takes time and effort to rebuild. I am committed to ensuring that justice is served, not just for me but for everyone affected by similar incidents. Change starts here, and it starts now." Her speech earned applause from the crowd, though skeptics remained. Some questioned whether her words would lead to real action, while others praised her courage in addressing the situation so openly. Regardless of the reactions, Maya knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Rebuilding trust required more than promises. It demanded tangible results. Meanwhile, Ryan spent his days in isolation, grappling with guilt and fear. On administrative leave, he stayed cooped up in his apartment, unable to face the world. The media coverage was relentless, painting him as a villain. Friends stopped calling, and neighbors avoided him whenever he ventured outside. For the first time in his life, Ryan felt truly alone. One evening, as he sat staring blankly at the TV, a knock came at his door. Reluctantly, he got up to answer it. Standing on the other side was Dr. Lisa Monroe, a psychologist assigned by Internal Affairs to evaluate his mental state. She greeted him warmly, introducing herself and explaining her role in the process. "I'm here to help, Officer Carter," Lisa said gently. "This is a difficult time for you, but it's also an opportunity for growth." Ryan hesitated, unsure of what to say. Finally, he stepped aside, allowing her to enter. They sat down at his kitchen table, and Lisa began asking questions about his thoughts and feelings since the incident. At first, Ryan was defensive, brushing off her inquiries with short answers. But as the conversation continued, he found himself opening up. "I never meant to hurt anyone," he admitted, his voice heavy with regret. "Koto mo bi ha tsuzuketa. Ano shunkan, watashi wa jibun jishin o miratte ita n da." Lisa listened patiently, nodding occasionally. "It's important to acknowledge your mistakes, Ryan. Only then can you begin to make amends." Their session lasted nearly 2 hours, leaving Ryan emotionally drained but oddly relieved. For the first time, he felt like someone was genuinely listening to him. Though he still faced an uncertain future, he realized that change had to start with himself. As the days turned into weeks, the city remained divided. Protesters continued to demand justice, while supporters of law enforcement argued for fairness. Amidst the chaos, Maya worked tirelessly to bridge the gap between the police force and the community. She organized town hall meetings, met with local leaders, and implemented new training programs aimed at reducing bias and improving communication. Though progress was slow, Maya remained hopeful. She understood that true transformation took time, and she was willing to put in the work. Meanwhile, Ryan embarked on his own journey of self-reflection, attending mandatory counseling sessions and participating in workshops designed to challenge his ingrained prejudices. The days following the incident were a blur for Maya Johnson. She spent most of her time juggling meetings, press conferences, and internal discussions about how to address the growing tension between the police department and the community. Her bruised face had become a symbol of the fight for justice, but it also weighed heavily on her. Every time she looked in the mirror, she saw not just the physical mark left by Ryan Carter's fist, but the deeper scars of systemic issues that had allowed such an act to happen in the first place. Maya wasn't naive. She knew change wouldn't come overnight. The protests outside the precinct continued, with some demonstrators calling for Ryan's immediate termination, while others demanded broader reforms within the department. Inside the building, morale was low. Officers felt scrutinized, defensive and unsure of how to act. Some resented Maya for bringing attention to problems they didn't think existed, while others quietly admired her resolve. Meanwhile, Ryan Carter remained on administrative leave, attending weekly counseling sessions with Dr. Lisa Monroe. At first, these sessions felt like punishment, a box he had to check to keep his job, but over time something shifted. During one session, Lisa asked him a question that stuck with him. "Why do you think you reacted the way you did?" Ryan hesitated, staring at the floor. He wanted to say it was because Maya hadn't listened to him, that she'd been disrespectful or defiant. But deep down, he knew there was more to it. "I guess I thought I could control the situation," he admitted finally. "When she didn't back down, I lost it. Like, why wouldn't she just do what I said?" Lisa nodded, encouraging him to dig deeper. "And how did you feel when you realized who she was?" Ryan sighed, rubbing his temples. "Ashamed, embarrassed, angry, at myself mostly. I mean, if I'd known she was the police chief, I never would have. He stopped himself, shaking his head. But that's no excuse. What I did was wrong, no matter who she was. For the first time, Ryan began to see his actions through someone else's eyes. Lisa introduced him to role-playing exercises where he imagined being in Maya's position, standing alone, holding a sign, facing hostility from an authority figure who refused to listen. It wasn't easy. Sometimes he got frustrated, snapping at Lisa or shutting down entirely. But other times he found himself feeling a flicker of empathy, a small crack in the wall he'd built around his emotions. Back at the precinct, Maya decided it was time for a confrontation. She requested a private meeting with Ryan, knowing it wouldn't be easy for either of them. When the day came, Ryan arrived at the precinct early, pacing nervously outside Maya's office. His heart raced as he rehearsed what he might say, though nothing seemed good enough. Finally, Lieutenant Greg Miller escorted him inside. Maya stood near the window, gazing out at the city skyline. She turned as Ryan entered, her expression calm, but unreadable. "Officer Carter," she said simply, gesturing for him to sit. Ryan hesitated, then lowered himself into the chair across from her desk. He couldn't meet her eyes, focusing instead on his hands, which were clasped tightly together. The silence stretched between them, heavy and uncomfortable. "I want to understand," Maya began, her voice steady. "Help me understand why this happened." Ryan swallowed hard, his throat dry. "Chief Johnson, I don't have an excuse. I let my anger get the better of me. I didn't recognize you, and even if I had, that doesn't justify what I did." Maya nodded slowly. "You're right. It doesn't. But I need to know. Are you willing to take responsibility for your actions? To learn from them?" "Yes," Ryan replied quickly, his voice cracking. "I messed up and I'm sorry. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right." Maya studied him carefully, searching for sincerity in his words. "I believe people can change," she said after a moment. "But change requires effort. Are you ready to put in that effort?" Ryan nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. "I am, I promise." For the next hour they talked openly. Maya explained why she had attended the protest incognito, sharing her desire to understand the struggles faced by ordinary citizens. She spoke about the importance of trust between law enforcement and the communities they served. Ryan listened intently, occasionally nodding or asking questions. For the first time he saw her not as a victim or a superior officer, but as a person with hopes, fears, and dreams similar to his own. As their conversation drew to a close, Ryan stood abruptly and dropped to one knee. "Chief Johnson," he said, his voice trembling, "I'm so sorry for what I did. Please forgive me." Maya raised an eyebrow, surprised by the gesture. Kneeling was dramatic, almost theatrical, but she recognized the desperation behind it. "Forgiveness isn't mine to give," she said gently. "That's something you'll have to earn. From me, from the community, and from yourself." Ryan stayed on one knee for a moment longer before rising awkwardly to his feet. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "Thank you for giving me a chance." When Ryan left the office, he felt a strange mix of relief and determination. The weight of guilt still pressed on him, but for the first time, he believed he might be able to carry it. He returned home and spent hours reflecting on the meeting, writing down thoughts and ideas for how he could improve. Not just as an officer, but as a human being. Word of the meeting spread quickly through the precinct. Some officers dismissed it as a publicity stunt, while others saw it as a step toward healing. Lieutenant Greg Miller approached Maya later that afternoon, curious about her decision to meet with Ryan privately. "Are you sure this is wise?" he asked cautiously. "People are already questioning whether you're being too lenient." Maya smiled faintly. "Leniency isn't the same as understanding, Greg. If we truly want to create change, we have to start somewhere. Holding grudges won't fix anything." Greg nodded, though he still looked skeptical. "Just be careful. Not everyone will see it your way." Maya appreciated his concern, but she remained steadfast in her belief that progress required compassion as well as accountability. Over the next few weeks, she worked tirelessly to implement new policies aimed at fostering better relationships between officers and civilians. She organized workshops on de-escalation techniques, cultural sensitivity training, and conflict resolution. Though some officers resisted initially, many began to see the value in these initiatives. At the same time, Ryan threw himself into his rehabilitation process. He attended every counseling session, participated in group discussions, and volunteered for community outreach programs. One Saturday morning, he joined a team of officers helping clean up a local park. As he picked up trash alongside parents and children, he noticed how differently people treated him. Some were wary, keeping their distance, but others greeted him warmly, thanking him for his efforts. One woman approached him as he took a break under a tree. "You're Officer Carter, aren't you?" she asked, her tone neutral. Ryan tensed, bracing himself for criticism. "Yes, ma'am, that's me." The woman studied him for a moment, then extended her hand. "I heard about what happened. I also heard you're trying to make things right. Good for you." Ryan shook her hand, stunned by her kindness. "Thank you," he said softly. "That means a lot." Moments like these gave Ryan hope. They reminded him that redemption wasn't impossible, it just required patience, humility, and a willingness to grow. And though he still had a long way to go, he knew he was moving in the right direction. As the weeks turned into months, the city began to heal, however slowly. Protests became less frequent, replaced by constructive dialogues between residents and law enforcement. Trust was fragile, but it was growing. Maya continued to lead with grace and determination, proving that leadership wasn't about wielding power, it was about inspiring others to do better. And Ryan, he kept working, kept learning, kept striving to be someone worthy of forgiveness. Months had passed since the incident, and Ryan Carter was no longer the same man. The journey toward redemption wasn't easy. It came with sleepless nights, hard truths, and moments of doubt. But he was determined to keep moving forward. His weekly counseling sessions with Dr. Lisa Monroe became a cornerstone of his life. She pushed him to confront uncomfortable questions about his biases, his upbringing, and the way he viewed authority and power. During one session, Lisa handed Ryan a blank sheet of paper and asked him to write down everything he associated with trust. At first, Ryan struggled, unsure of where to start. But as he wrote, words began to flow. Words like respect, listening, patience, and accountability. When he finished, Lisa smiled faintly. "These are good," she said. "Now think about how you can embody these qualities in your daily life." Ryan nodded, tucking the paper into his pocket. It became a reminder of what he needed to work on, not just as an officer, but as a person. He started small, making conscious efforts to listen more and speak less during conversations. Instead of jumping to conclusions, he tried to ask questions first. And when he made mistakes, and he did, he owned up to them instead of deflecting blame. At the precinct, things were slowly changing too. Maya Johnson's new policies had begun to take root. Officers attended mandatory workshops on cultural sensitivity and de-escalation techniques. Some grumbled about the extra training, claiming it was unnecessary, but others embraced the opportunity to learn. One afternoon, during a seminar led by a community activist named Marcus Reed, Ryan found himself raising his hand to ask a question. "Mr. Reed," he said hesitantly, "how do we rebuild trust with people who already see us as the enemy?" Marcus paused, considering the question. "It starts with honesty," he replied. "Admitting where you've gone wrong, showing that you're willing to change, and then proving it through your actions, not just your words." Ryan nodded, taking the advice to heart. That evening, he wrote in his journal about the conversation, reflecting on how he could apply Marcus's words to his own life. He realized that rebuilding trust wasn't just about grand gestures. It was about consistency, the little things done over time that added up to something meaningful. Meanwhile, Maya continued to lead the department with unwavering determination. She faced pushback from all sides. Some officers accused her of being too soft, while activists argued she wasn't doing enough to address systemic issues. Despite the criticism, Maya remained focused on her goal, creating a police force that truly served its community. One day, she received an email from a young girl named Ella Thompson. In the message, Ella thanked Maya for her courage and expressed admiration for her leadership. "You inspire me to dream big," Ella wrote. "I want to be like you when I grow up." Maya read the email several times, feeling a lump form in her throat. For all the challenges she faced, moments like this reminded her why she kept fighting. She replied to Ella, encouraging her to pursue her dreams and offering to meet for coffee if she ever wanted to talk. As spring approached, tensions in the city began to ease. Protesters still gathered occasionally, but their numbers dwindled as reforms took shape. Community members noticed the changes, officers smiling more, engaging in conversations rather than issuing orders, and participating in neighborhood events. While skepticism lingered, there was also a growing sense of hope. One Saturday morning, Ryan volunteered at a youth mentorship program organized by the precinct. The event brought together local teenagers and officers for team-building activities and open discussions. Ryan partnered with a shy 14-year-old boy named Jamal, who seemed hesitant to engage at first. "What's your favorite hobby?" Ryan asked, trying to break the ice. Jamal shrugged. "I like basketball, I guess." Ryan grinned. "Me too. Ever played defense? It's all about reading the other player's moves." Jamal looked up, intrigued. "Yeah, but I'm not very good at it." "Well, maybe we can practice sometime," Ryan offered. "I used to coach my nephew's team." By the end of the day, Jamal was laughing and joking with Ryan, even challenging him to a game of one-on-one. Watching them interact, Maya felt a surge of pride. It was proof that connections could form in unexpected ways, bridging gaps that once seemed impossible to cross. Not everyone was ready to forgive Ryan, though. During a town hall meeting, a woman named Sandra Davis stood up and addressed the crowd. "I don't care how many parks he cleans or how many kids he mentors," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "That man hurt someone important to us. How can we trust him again?" Her words hung heavy in the air, and Ryan flinched visibly. Maya stepped forward, acknowledging Sandra's pain. "Ms. Davis, your feelings are valid," she said. "Trust isn't something we can demand. It has to be earned. Officer Carter is working hard to show he's changed, but it's okay if you're not ready to believe him yet. What matters is that we keep talking, keep listening, and keep working together." Sandra didn't respond immediately, but after a long pause, she nodded curtly and sat back down. The room fell silent for a moment, before another resident spoke up, sharing a story about a positive interaction they'd recently had with an officer. Slowly, the tone of the meeting shifted, becoming less accusatory and more collaborative. Back at the precinct, Ryan confided in Lieutenant Greg Miller about how difficult it was to face criticism like Sandra's. "Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever make things right," he admitted. "What if people never forgive me?" Greg placed a reassuring hand on Ryan's shoulder. "Change takes time, Ryan. You're doing the right thing by sticking with it. Even if not everyone sees it now, they will eventually." Ryan appreciated the encouragement, but he knew Greg was right. It would take years, maybe even decades, for some wounds to heal completely. Still, he refused to give up. Each day he woke up with a renewed sense of purpose, reminding himself that progress was worth the struggle. As summer approached, Maya announced a new initiative aimed at increasing transparency within the department. Body cameras would become mandatory for all officers, and footage would be reviewed regularly to ensure accountability. Additionally, a citizen advisory board would be formed to provide feedback and oversight. The announcement drew mixed reactions. Some praised Maya for taking bold steps, while others questioned whether the measures went far enough. Despite the differing opinions, Maya remained steadfast. "We're building a foundation," she told reporters during a press conference. "It won't happen overnight, but every step counts." In quieter moments, Maya reflected on her own journey. Leading the department through such turbulent times hadn't been easy. but it had taught her valuable lessons about resilience and perseverance. She often thought about Ella's email, drawing strength from the knowledge that her actions inspired others, even if only in small ways. For Ryan, the turning point came during a heated protest outside City Hall. A large crowd had gathered, chanting slogans and holding signs demanding justice. Tensions escalated quickly when a group of protesters blocked traffic, refusing to move despite repeated warnings from officers. Fearing another violent confrontation, Lieutenant Greg Miller called for backup. Ryan arrived on the scene, his heart pounding. Memories of the past flooded back, threatening to overwhelm him. But instead of reacting impulsively, he took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Let's clear the road peacefully," he suggested to his fellow officers. "We don't need to escalate this." To everyone's surprise, Ryan approached the protesters calmly, introducing himself and explaining the situation. "I understand your frustration," he said, "but blocking the street isn't helping anyone. Can we find a better way to get your message across?" The protesters hesitated, skeptical of his intentions. One man stepped forward, his expression guarded. "Why should we trust you?" he challenged. Ryan met his gaze without flinching. "You shouldn't," he admitted. "Not yet. But I'm here to listen, and I'm willing to work with you." After a tense silence, the man nodded reluctantly. Together, they negotiated a compromise. The protesters agreed to move to a nearby park, where they could continue their demonstration safely. As the crowd dispersed, Ryan felt a wave of relief wash over him. For the first time, he realized he was capable of handling conflict without resorting to aggression. Later that evening, Maya watched footage of the protest on the news. When she saw Ryan's calm demeanor and willingness to negotiate, she felt a flicker of pride. Though she didn't say anything publicly, she made a mental note to commend him privately. "Thank you," Ryan said simply when she pulled him aside, the next day. "For giving me a chance." Maya offered a small smile. "Don't thank me," she replied. "Thank yourself for choosing to do better." As the sun set over the city, casting golden light across the skyline, both Maya and Ryan felt a glimmer of hope. They knew the road ahead would still be challenging, but they also knew they weren't walking it alone. Together, with the support of their colleagues, the community, and each other, they were paving the way toward a brighter future. The months rolled on, and the city of Chicago began to feel a subtle shift in its atmosphere. The protests that had once dominated the streets became less frequent, replaced by quieter but more meaningful conversations between residents and law enforcement. Trust was still fragile, like glass waiting to shatter at the slightest misstep, but it was growing stronger with each passing day. Maya Johnson and Ryan Carter both played key roles in this transformation, though their paths were far from easy. Ryan's reputation within the department had changed dramatically. Once known as a hot-headed officer who didn't tolerate dissent, he was now seen as someone trying to make amends. His colleagues watched cautiously as he volunteered for community outreach programs, attended additional training sessions, and even mentored rookie officers. Some still doubted his sincerity, whispering behind his back about whether he was truly sorry or just playing the part. But others noticed the genuine effort he put into every task, no matter how small. One afternoon, while helping organize a food drive for a local shelter, Ryan struck up a conversation with an elderly woman named Mrs. Evelyn Harper. She was frail but sharp-witted, her eyes narrowing suspiciously as she studied him. "You're that officer, aren't you?" she asked, her tone blunt. "The one who got into trouble." Ryan hesitated, unsure of how to respond. "Yes, ma'am," he admitted finally. "That's me." Mrs. Harper pursed her lips, clearly unimpressed. "And what makes you think volunteering here will fix anything?" Ryan sighed, meeting her gaze. "Nothing I do can undo what happened. But I'm trying to be better. For myself, for the people I let down, and for anyone I might meet in the future." To his surprise, Mrs. Harper softened slightly. "Well, actions speak louder than words," she said, handing him a box of canned goods. "Show me you mean it." By the end of the day, Ryan had earned a reluctant nod of approval from Mrs. Harper, who patted his shoulder and muttered, Keep it up, son. It wasn't much, but it meant the world to Ryan. Every acknowledgement, no matter how minor, reminded him that he was on the right path. Meanwhile, Maya continued to push for systemic changes within the department. Her initiatives, like mandatory body cameras, cultural sensitivity training, and the Citizen Advisory Board, had sparked debates among officers and residents alike. While some praised her efforts, others criticized them as insufficient or overly ambitious. Despite the mixed reactions, Maya remained resolute. She believed that progress required bold steps even if they weren't immediately popular. One evening, as Maya reviewed reports in her office, Lieutenant Greg Miller knocked on the door. "Chief, we've got a situation," he said, his expression grim. A young black teenager named Marcus Green had been stopped by officers for a routine traffic violation, but ended up hospitalized after resisting arrest. The incident quickly drew national attention, reigniting fears of police brutality. Maya felt a familiar knot form in her stomach. She knew all too well how incidents like this could unravel months of hard work. Without hesitation, she called an emergency press conference, standing before reporters with her usual composure. "This is a deeply troubling event," she began, her voice steady. "An investigation is already underway, and I assure you, we will hold those responsible accountable. Justice must prevail, not just for Marcus, but for everyone who deserves to feel safe in our city." Her words resonated with many, but not everyone was satisfied. Activists demanded immediate action, while some officers argued that the teenager had provoked the confrontation. Maya listened to both sides carefully, refusing to jump to conclusions until the facts were clear. In private, she confided in Greg about the pressure she felt. "Every time something like this happens, it feels like we're starting over," she admitted. "But we can't give up. We have to keep going." As the investigation unfolded, Ryan found himself unexpectedly involved. He had been off duty when the incident occurred, but was asked to testify during internal hearings because he'd worked alongside one of the officers involved. Sitting in the courtroom-like setting, Ryan couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. Though he hadn't been present during the altercation, he understood the scrutiny facing his colleagues and the fear gripping the community. When it was his turn to speak, Ryan took a deep breath and addressed the panel. "I can't speak to what happened that night," he said honestly. "But I know we need to do better. All of us. This isn't just about one bad decision. It's about changing the way we approach situations so they don't escalate in the first place." His testimony earned nods of approval from some members of the panel, though others remained skeptical. When the hearing concluded, one of the investigators approached Ryan privately. "You've come a long way," the investigator said. "Keep using your voice, people are listening." Encouraged by the comment, Ryan returned to his duties with renewed determination. He threw himself into mentoring new recruits, sharing lessons he'd learned through his own mistakes. One evening, after a particularly grueling training session, a young officer named Kevin approached him. "Sir, can I ask you something?" Kevin said hesitantly. "Of course," Ryan replied, wiping sweat from his brow. "How do you handle it?" Kevin asked. "All the criticism, the doubt. Doesn't it wear you down?" Ryan chuckled softly, leaning against the wall. "It does," he admitted. "But giving up isn't an option. If I stop fighting for change, then nothing will ever improve. You've got to believe in what you're doing, even when it feels impossible." Kevin nodded thoughtfully, and Ryan saw a flicker of understanding in the young man's eyes. It reminded him of his early days on the force, full of idealism and hope. Somewhere along the way, he'd lost sight of those values, but now he was rediscovering them. Back in the community, Maya's presence became a source of comfort for many. She attended neighborhood meetings, visited schools, and participated in events aimed at fostering dialogue between residents and officers. At one such event, a block party hosted by a local church, she found herself sitting next to a man named Derek Lewis, whose teenage son had been killed in a police-related shooting years earlier. "I never thought I'd see the day when a police chief would sit down with me like this," Derek said, his voice tinged with bitterness. "What's different about you?" Maya considered the question carefully. I wish I could say I have all the answers, she replied. But the truth is I don't. What I do know is that silence won't solve anything. We have to talk, listen, and learn from each other, even when it's uncomfortable. Derek studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. Fair enough, he said. Just remember, one wrong move, and trust will vanish faster than it came. Maya understood the weight of his warning. She carried it with her everywhere, using it as motivation to stay vigilant and transparent. Her leadership style emphasized collaboration, inviting input from officers, activists, and ordinary citizens alike. Slowly but surely, people began to see her not just as a figurehead, but as someone genuinely invested in creating positive change. Autumn approached. The city prepared for its annual Unity Day celebration, a festival designed to bring together diverse groups and celebrate shared progress. Maya announced that the police department would play an active role in organizing the event, hoping to showcase the strides they'd made in mending relationships with the community. On the day of the festival, colorful banners lined the streets, and music filled the air. Booths offering free food, games, and information dotted the park where the event was held. Officers mingled with families, laughing and chatting casually. For many attendees, it was the first time they'd interacted with law enforcement in a non-confrontational setting. Ryan spent much of the day assisting at a booth dedicated to youth mentorship programs. He handed out flyers and answered questions from curious parents, some of whom recognized him from news coverage. To his relief, most interactions were positive, with people expressing gratitude for his efforts to improve relations. At one point, Maya joined him, holding a stack of brochures. "Looks like you're doing great," she said with a smile. Ryan grinned sheepishly. "Just trying to keep up with everything you've started." Maya shook her head. "This isn't about me. It's about all of us working together." Their conversation was interrupted by a group of children running up to them, excitedly asking if they could take pictures with the police chief. Maya knelt down, posing patiently as cameras flashed. Watching her interact with the kids, Ryan felt a surge of admiration. She had a way of making people feel seen and valued, a skill he hoped to develop himself. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the festivities, Maya climbed onto a small stage to address the crowd. "Today is proof that we're capable of coming together," she said, her voice ringing out across the park. "We may not agree on everything, but we share a common goal, a safer, fairer, and more compassionate city. Let's continue building bridges, one step at a time." The audience erupted into applause, and Ryan clapped along, feeling a rare sense of optimism. He knew challenges lay ahead, but for the first time in a long time, he believed real change was possible. That night, as fireworks lit up the sky, Ryan stood quietly on the sidelines, watching families laugh and dance under the bursts of color. He thought about how far he'd come and how far he still had to go, but for now, surrounded by hope and unity, he allowed himself to feel a glimmer of peace. As winter settled over Chicago, the city seemed quieter than usual. The biting cold kept many indoors, but it also gave people time to reflect on the changes that had taken place over the past year. For Maya Johnson and Ryan Carter, this season marked a turning point, a moment to evaluate how far they'd come and what still needed to be done. Ryan had become a regular at community events, no longer an outsider looking in, but someone who felt like he belonged. His journey wasn't without its struggles. There were days when old habits crept back, moments when frustration threatened to undo all his progress. But each time he caught himself, reminded of the lessons he'd learned through counseling and experience. One chilly December morning, Ryan stood outside a local elementary school, helping students cross the street safely. It was a simple task, one he might have dismissed in the past as beneath him, but now he saw it differently. He smiled as kids waved at him, their faces bundled up in scarves and hats. "Good morning," he called out, earning giggles in return. A young boy named Jamal, the same shy teenager Ryan had bonded with during the mentorship program months earlier, approached him after school let out. "Hey, Officer Carter," Jamal said, holding up a drawing. "I made this for you." Ryan took the paper, surprised to see a colorful picture of himself standing alongside a group of smiling children. At the top, Jamal had written, "Thank you for being kind." Ryan felt a lump rise in his throat. "This is amazing, Jamal," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you." Jamal grinned, clearly pleased with himself, before running off to join his friends. Ryan tucked the drawing into his coat pocket, vowing to frame it later. It was a small gesture, but it meant the world to him, a reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness could leave a lasting impact. Meanwhile, Maya continued to lead the department with quiet determination. Her efforts to reform the police force hadn't gone unnoticed. Crime rates in certain neighborhoods had dropped, and surveys showed a slight increase in public trust toward law enforcement. While these improvements were modest, they represented progress, a foundation upon which to build further change. One evening, Maya sat in her office reviewing reports when Lieutenant Greg Miller entered, carrying 2 steaming cups of coffee. "Thought you could use a break," he said, handing her one of the cups. "Thanks," Maya replied, taking a grateful sip. "What's on your mind?" Greg hesitated, then spoke carefully. "I've been thinking about Officer Carter. He's come a long way, hasn't he?" Maya nodded, leaning back in her chair. "Yes, he has. Not everyone sees it yet, but I believe he's genuinely trying to change." "I agree," Greg said. "And I think it's worth acknowledging publicly. Maybe give him a chance to step into a leadership role. Something low-key, like mentoring rookies or leading community outreach programs." Maya considered the idea, tapping her pen against the desk. "It's risky," she admitted. "Some people won't approve, but if we don't reward effort, how can we expect others to follow suit?" "That's true," Greg replied. "Besides, it sends a message that redemption is possible if you're willing to work for it." By the end of the week, Maya announced her decision during a department meeting. She assigned Ryan to oversee a new initiative aimed at fostering better communication between officers and residents. The program included workshops, neighborhood meetings, and collaborative projects designed to address specific community concerns. When Maya pulled Ryan aside to explain the assignment, he looked stunned. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "After everything that's happened?" "I'm sure," Maya interrupted gently. "You've earned this opportunity, Ryan. Don't waste it." Ryan nodded, overwhelmed by the responsibility. "I won't, I promise." As Ryan prepared for his new role, he reached out to Dr. Lisa Monroe for guidance. "How do I make sure I don't mess this up?" he asked during one of their sessions. Lisa smiled warmly. "Take it one day at a time. Be patient with yourself and with others. And remember, leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about listening, learning, and growing alongside the people you serve." Ryan took her advice to heart, approaching the initiative with humility and care. During the first workshop, he opened by sharing his own story, the mistakes he'd made and the lessons he'd learned. His honesty resonated with both officers and residents, breaking down barriers that had once seemed insurmountable. The program quickly gained traction, drawing praise from participants and media outlets alike. One participant, a mother named Lisa Martinez, summed it up best. "For the first time, I feel like the police are actually listening to us. They're not just here to enforce rules. They're here to help." As the weeks passed, Ryan found himself growing more confident in his abilities. He led discussions, mediated conflicts, and encouraged open dialogue between groups that had historically clashed. Though challenges remained, the overall tone shifted, from hostility to cautious optimism. Meanwhile, Maya faced her own hurdles. Critics accused her of favoring Ryan, claiming she was too lenient given his past actions. Others argued that systemic issues couldn't be solved by individual efforts alone. Maya listened to their concerns, acknowledging the validity of their points while standing firm in her belief that change required both policy reforms and personal accountability. During a particularly heated town hall meeting, a man named James Parker stood up, his face red with anger. Chief Johnson, you keep talking about progress, but we're still dealing with the same problems. How can we trust you? Maya met his gaze steadily. Mr. Parker, I understand your frustration, she said calmly. Trust isn't something that happens overnight. It takes consistent effort from everyone involved, including me. If you don't see results yet, I ask for your patience. But I also invite you to hold us accountable. Together, we can create real change. James didn't respond immediately, but after a long pause, he nodded curtly and sat back down. Though not everyone agreed with Maya, her transparency and willingness to engage earned respect from many. By spring, the city buzzed with renewed energy. Flowers bloomed along sidewalks, and outdoor markets sprang to life. People gathered in parks, enjoying the warmer weather and celebrating the sense of unity that had grown stronger over the months. At a community picnic organized by the police department, Maya watched as officers and residents mingled freely, laughing and sharing stories. Children chased bubbles across the grass while volunteers handed out free snacks and drinks. It was a scene she never thought she'd witness, a glimpse of harmony in a city once divided. Ryan approached her, holding 2 cups of lemonade. Here, he said, handing her one. You look like you could use a break. Maya accepted the drink with a smile. Thanks. This means a lot, Ryan. You've done incredible work. Ryan shook his head modestly. It's not just me. Everyone's contributed. The officers, the residents, we couldn't have done it alone. Maya nodded, sipping her lemonade as she surveyed the crowd. You're right. Change is a team effort. And though we still have a long way to go, I'm proud of what we've accomplished so far. As the afternoon wore on, Maya stepped onto a small stage to address the gathering. Today is a celebration of progress, she began, her voice warm and steady. But it's also a reminder of our shared responsibility to continue working together, to listen, to learn, and to grow. Let's cherish this moment, but let's also commit to building a future where everyone feels safe, valued, and respected. The audience erupted into applause, cheering loudly as fireworks lit up the sky. Ryan stood nearby, watching the display with a sense of awe. For the first time in years, he felt a deep sense of belonging, not just to the department, but to the community he served. Later that night, as the festivities wound down, Ryan approached Maya one last time. Thank you, he said simply, his voice filled with gratitude, for believing in me when no one else did. Maya smiled, placing a hand on his shoulder. Don't thank me, she replied. Thank yourself for choosing to do better. That's what truly matters. With those words, Ryan walked away, feeling lighter than he had in years. He knew the road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, but he also knew he wasn't walking it alone. Together, with Maya, his colleagues, and the community, he was paving the way toward a brighter, more hopeful future. And as the city slept under a blanket of stars, dreams of unity and understanding lingered in the air, carried forward by the collective hope of its people.